Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment and share these stories with someone who might need them. Each story is meant to help you pause, reflect, and think about your own relationships, how you love, how you heal, and how you grow. If you'd like more insight into the stories or want to add one to your next book club, visit graceguidance.com. You can find the full collection there, along with reflection prompts to keep the conversations going. And remember, every story in Heart Chat Stories is a chance to rediscover yourself, one honest chat at a time.
Selena never had a relationship with her father. Her mother and aunt raised her to be herself, unapologetically, and to always do the things that made her happy. For the first 30 years of her life, she lived inside that teaching, moving freely, choosing joy without explanation. Then she met Dominic. She met him at a gym she attended on and off. He was always there, always. Whenever she decided to step onto the treadmill, let the sweat bead on her skin, and snap a picture for social media. She never noticed how consistently he noticed her. "Are you going to work out?" a slightly breathless voice asked. "Or do you just come here to look like you do?" Selena froze mid-photo. She looked up, eyebrow already raised, scanning the room until her eyes landed on the source of the voice, an unfamiliar man standing too close for comfort. "Excuse me?" she asked. He nodded toward the machine beside her. "Are you planning to use the leg press? Or are you just holding the space so the lady to your left, or myself, can't?" Selena scoffed, grabbed her phone, and stepped back. "You're being rude." The man lifted both hands calmly, palms open. "I'm just asking a question. No harm meant." She rolled her eyes and adjusted the seat. "I know what I'm doing." He tilted his head, watching her movements. "You think you do. But if you adjusted the seat height and chose a weight that actually challenged you, you'd see real change." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for help." The woman who had been waiting quietly moved on to another machine, the moment clearly no longer about her. The man stepped closer now, too close, his voice lower. "I know," he said, "but you looked like someone who hates wasting potential." Selena paused. She didn't look at him, but she felt him, his presence steady, confident, irritatingly grounded. "And you are?" she asked. "Dominic," he said, "and you've been doing this wrong." She finally turned to face him, eyes sharp, smile dangerous. "Funny," she replied. "That's what men usually say right before they get ignored." Dominic smiled, not offended, not apologetic. "Good," he said. "I like a challenge." "If you knew what you were doing," he said evenly, "you would have seen results by now. You always use the same weight. You never adjust the seat at the beginning of your workout, so you're never getting maximum engagement." Before Selena could respond, the man stepped forward and adjusted the weight. He motioned for her to stand, then lowered the seat slightly. When he was done, he extended his hand, not touching her, just offering direction. "Sit. Try it now." Selena didn't know what to think. She was offended by how much he had noticed, and unsettled by how right he sounded. Still, curiosity won. She shifted where he guided her and sat back down. The difference was immediate. The machine moved differently, worked differently. Each lift burned deeper, demanded more. It was harder. Honest, harder. Truth was, she had never thought about any of the things he mentioned. She usually just hopped on the machine and hoped effort alone would give her what she wanted. "So, gym guru, Dominic," she said, nodding. "Thank you, but I'm not some damsel in distress. I knew what I wasn't doing." Dominic didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on her form. "Okay, Selena." She faltered mid-lift. "Wait, what?" She finished the rep and looked up. "How do you know my name? And what does okay, Selena mean?" "Stop." "Stop what?" "The reps. You're done. Rest." "Oh," she thought, standing slowly. Dominic walked past her, adjusted the machine again, and sat down himself. Selena moved to the side, watching as he began lifting, controlled, steady, focused. "You didn't answer my question," she said. "How do you know my name?" He didn't respond, just breathed, lifted. Selena felt something unfamiliar stir low in her belly. Interest, irritation, curiosity all tangled together. He was confident, grounded, almost controlling. Not in a harmful way, in a deliberate way. She wanted to know more, but she refused to ask if he was taken. She wasn't about to look needy. When Dominic finished, he stood and turned, not to her, but to the couple working out beside them. "Hey," he said casually, "how are you two doing this morning?" They nodded, a little surprised. "You come here often, right?" "Yes," the woman answered. "Quick question," Dominic continued. "Do you know this young lady's name?" The woman hesitated, then glanced at Selena. Selena," she said softly, giving a shy wave. Dominic slowly turned back toward Selena. She stood frozen, arms folded, lifting her hand in a small, stunned wave. Her expression caught somewhere between disbelief and reluctant amusement. And Dominic smiled, just enough to let her know. He'd been paying attention all along. Dominic didn't want her embarrassed, not really. That wasn't his aim. So he let the moment pass without pressing it further, easing back into casual conversation as if nothing sharp had just happened between them. He'd noticed her long before today. Not just the way she moved through the gym, confident, unbothered, unapologetically present, but the way she spoke when she thought no one was listening. On nights when the gym was quieter, Dominic sometimes caught fragments of her voice drifting through her phone as she recorded her social media lives. She talked the way people do when they've decided to trust themselves. Honest, playful, free. That freedom pulled at him. It stirred something he hadn't quite figured out how to live yet in his own life. Something he'd organized away under discipline, structure, and restraint. He admired her for it, maybe even envied her. What he'd done today wasn't about control. It was about connection, a way in, a way to speak to her without pretending he hadn't been watching, learning, noticing, and eventually, if she allowed it, a way to ask her out. Selena wiped her hands with a towel, still feeling the echo of the burn in her legs. She glanced at Dominic, half expecting another comment, another correction. Instead, he just smiled. Not smug, not superior. Easy. "You did good," he said. "That adjustment will feel different tomorrow." She laughed lightly. "That's one way to say I'm going to be sore." "Productively sore," he corrected. She shook her head, amused despite herself. There was something disarming about him now. Less edge, more calm. Like he wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Dominic hesitated, just long enough for the moment to stay honest. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, voice casual but deliberate. "If you're not rushing off, would you want to join me for an after-workout smoothie?" She raised an eyebrow. "My treat." Selena studied him, not guarded, just curious. The silence stretched, not awkward, just open. Selena had gone through enough ego shock in the last 15 minutes to last her a week. She didn't trust her mouth to say the right thing, so she simply nodded yes and followed Dominic to the smoothie bar. When it was her turn to order, she didn't hesitate. She asked for the extra large, making sure the attendant heard her clearly. a quiet act of rebellion, a small win. Dominic didn't flinch. He paid for it with a faint smirk, like he knew exactly what she was doing, and found it amusing. Dominic knew Selena was trying to get him back with a $16 smoothie she probably wouldn't even finish. He watched her eyes widen as the cup was handed over, its size suddenly impractical. She tried to gather it along with her phone, keys, and towel, clearly underestimating how many hands she actually had. He lifted an eyebrow in a silent question. She hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead," she said. He took the smoothie carefully and carried it to a small table near the window. They sat across from each other, the hum of the gym fading into background noise. Selena shifted in her chair, adjusting her posture, crossing and uncrossing her legs. Dominic noticed. He thought it was cute, but more than that, he wanted her to feel at ease. So he explained. "I'm not a stalker," he said calmly. "Just observant." She looked at him, skeptical. "I'd bet a few people know your name," he continued, "because when you record your videos, you say it at the beginning and the end. Every time." A small glimmer of understanding softened her eyes. "Still sounds a little stalkerish to me," Selena said, smiling as she took her first sip. Dominic laughed, genuine and unguarded. "Call it what you want. When someone dominates a space the way you do, it's hard not to notice a personality like yours." They talked. Selena told him how she'd grown her social media page in under a year, how it started as motivation and slowly became a brand, how she and a friend were developing an exercise clothing line built around comfort, confidence, and visibility. Dominic listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "I admire the hustle," he said. "And I get the filming, truly. But some people come to the gym to disappear into their workout, not be part of someone else's content." She leaned back, thinking. "You know," she said slowly, "I could create a content gym, a space where people want to film, create, be loud, be seen." Dominic's eyes lit up. He nodded. "That's actually a great idea. Then the serious lifters can lift, and the creators can create." Selena smiled, surprised at how natural it felt to build something out loud with him. They sat there longer than either of them expected. Two people who hadn't planned on staying, lingering anyway. And somewhere between smoothies and shared ideas, something quiet and promising settled in the space between them. Not attraction that rushed, but interest that stayed. An hour slipped by without either of them noticing. The smoothie cups sat mostly untouched now, condensation rings marking time on the table. Selena glanced at her phone and sighed softly. "I have to go," she said, reluctant but honest. Dominic nodded, understanding without disappointment. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "Number?" She smiled and typed it in, then handed her phone to him in return. Their fingers brushed, brief, unintentional, noticeable. He didn't rush the moment. "Would you want to go out sometime this week?" he asked. Not demanding, not vague, just clear. Selena studied him for a second. Dominic was attractive, there was no denying that, but it was more than that. Once you got past his tough exterior, he was easy to talk to. Present, thoughtful. The kind of man who listened as much as he spoke. She nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." His smile was slow and restrained, like he didn't want to scare the moment away. "I'll text you," he said. "Don't wait too long," she replied lightly. "I won't." They stood, gathering their things, walking out together but not touching, both aware that whatever this was, didn't need to be rushed. As Selena headed to her car, she glanced back once. Dominic was still there, watching her go. Not possessive, not lingering too long. Just intentional. And for the first time in a while, Selena felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Anticipation. 1 week later, Dominic pulled up to her friend's house right on time. Selena noticed that first. Not early, not late. Precise. She stepped out wearing ease like an accessory. Soft dress, comfortable shoes, hair loose in a way that suggested she hadn't overthought any of it. Dominic straightened slightly when he saw her, then immediately caught himself. They drove to an open night market across town. Live music floating through warm air, food trucks glowing, vendors calling out, laughter threading everything together. As they walked through the entrance, Selena glanced sideways at him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why are you so serious?" Dominic exhaled slowly, like he'd expected the question sooner or later. "My dad was military," he said. "He didn't want to raise slackers. Order mattered. Discipline mattered. If things weren't organized, if schedules slipped, if we were messy, he snapped us right back into place." She studied his face as they walked. "Eventually," he continued, "I just stayed that way. Order became normal." "That sounds depressing," Selena said gently. "Like you didn't really get to be a kid." He shook his head. "I had a good childhood. It just wasn't spontaneous. Everything was calculated. My mom, my little brother, we all fell in line with what my dad planned." She slowed her steps. "So you couldn't just wake up one day and wing it?" Dominic smiled faintly. "No. He hated unplanned days. I can see the downside now, but it taught me responsibility. How to finish things. Most people avoid discipline because they're afraid of what it'll cost them." Selena hummed thoughtfully. "I like what discipline produces," she said. "I just hate doing it." That made him laugh, soft, surprised. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully, music pulsing behind them. "Don't you ever want to let your low cut down?" she teased. "And do something you never thought you'd do?" Dominic held her gaze longer than necessary. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I stay close to the goal. If I wander too far, I might never reach it." She tilted her head, eyes curious. Not challenging, just inviting. "Is that fear?" she asked. "That if you go with the flow, you won't get what you want?" He considered that. "Maybe," he said quietly. "I don't really know another way." Selena smiled then. Slow, knowing, playful. "Well," she said, turning back toward the lights and music. "Tonight isn't a goal. It's just a moment." She took 2 steps ahead of him, then looked back over her shoulder. "Try not to plan it too much." Dominic watched her for a beat before following, hands in his pockets, restraint intact, interest undeniable. He didn't reach for her, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, he wondered what might happen if, just once, he did. They drifted through the night market playing games, ring toss, balloon darts, anything that came with a chance to win something useless and laugh about it later. Dominic was surprisingly competitive, focused, determined. Selena found that hilarious. Her laughter came easy and unguarded, spilling out of her whenever he missed a shot or pretended not to care when she beat him. Dominic pretended to grumble, but the truth was, he was captivated by the sound of her laugh, by the way her joy wasn't something she rationed or restrained. It just was. "Do you want to go on a ride?" Selena asked suddenly, pointing toward the small cluster of carnival lights spinning in the distance. Dominic hesitated. "I don't really like rides." "Why not?" "Too many things can go wrong," he said simply. She smiled, already reaching for his hand. "It'll be safe. Come on." He looked at her hand, looked at her face, and then, against instinct, he nodded. The ride lifted them into motion before he could rethink it. Selena laughed immediately, the sound carried by the night air. When the ride dipped unexpectedly, she grabbed onto Dominic without thinking. Her grip was instinctive, firm, close. Dominic stiffened at first, not from fear, but from the suddenness of her against him. He felt himself tighten under her hold, muscles bracing, breath shifting. Control threatened to slip, and he tried to steady himself, to recenter. But Selena was too much for his guard. The way she moved with the motion of the ride, the way her body trusted the moment, the way she leaned into him without hesitation. It made him want, just for a second, to forget the rules, to see what letting go might feel like. When the ride slowed and came to a stop, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. She grinned at him. "See? Safe." He shook his head, laughing quietly. "You're dangerous." "Only to boring routines," she teased. Later, she handed him a fried Oreo, powdered sugar dusting his fingers the moment he took it. "I don't eat things like this," he said. "Tonight you do," she replied. He took a bite, paused, then another. Selena watched his expression change and smiled triumphantly. "Don't get used to it," he said, though there was no conviction in his voice. "I won't," she said softly. "But it's nice to know you can bend." They walked on, closer now, not touching, but aware of each other in a way that lingered. And Dominic realized something quietly unsettling and thrilling all at once. Selena wasn't trying to change him. She was simply showing him another way to be. By the end of the night, Selena could see it, the little boy in Dominic loosening his grip on life. He leaned in closer now when he laughed, no longer guarding the space between them. His laughter wasn't measured or careful anymore. It came from somewhere deeper, freer, somewhere he didn't often visit. Dominic felt an unfamiliar ache rise in his chest, a deep, steady need to inhale Selena like fresh flowers after rain, to memorize her presence, to stay in this version of himself just a little longer. At one of the final game booths, he won her a large stuffed teddy bear. When the attendant handed it over, Selena gasped dramatically, then laughed and leapt into his arms without thinking. The contact stole his breath. She fit there easily, warm, light, trusting. She pressed a sweet peck to his cheek, quick and innocent, and Dominic closed his eyes for half a second longer than necessary. He wanted to keep her there, wanted to forget the world and the rules and the careful lines he'd drawn for himself. Instead, he shifted, gently, placing the bear in his arms instead of her. Restraint, again. When the night finally ended, Dominic walked her to her friend's door. She wrapped her arms around him in a lingering hug, not rushed, not demanding. He held her, just enough. When he stepped back, he lingered for a moment, eyes searching her face like he was committing it to memory. Then he turned to leave. "Dominic," she called softly. He paused. "If this were my place," she said, voice steady but warm, "I'd invite you to stay." He didn't turn around right away. When he did, his expression was calm, but his eyes told the truth. "I know," he said quietly. There was no surprise in his voice, just certainty. He nodded once, a promise wrapped in patience, then walked away. Selena watched him go, heart steady, smile slow. Dominic didn't look back, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. And one day, she would find out exactly who he was when he finally stopped holding himself back. Over the next few months, their connection settled into something steady. They met at the gym, they went out to dinner, movies, festivals, long walks that turned into longer conversations. They learned each other in ordinary moments, the kind that don't rush intimacy but quietly build trust. What stood out most to Selena was this: Dominic did exactly what he said he would do. If he said he'd call, he called. If he said he'd be there at 7, he was there at 6:55. If he made a plan, it happened. She wasn't used to that. In her last 2 relationships, promises had been easy words. She would get dressed, get excited, get ready, only to be met with silence, excuses, or disappointment. Somewhere along the way, she'd learned to prepare for people not to show up. Dominic changed that. There was one date in particular, one he had planned, that made it impossible for her to ignore the difference. He told her exactly what he was going to do, step by step. And for once, she didn't prepare the way she normally would. No backup plan, no emotional armor. He showed up exactly as he said he would. It impressed her more than any grand gesture ever could. As time passed, their ways began to rub off on each other. Dominic planned dates down to the detail, but the wind didn't always cooperate. Sometimes reservations changed, sometimes plans shifted, sometimes life simply refused to follow the schedule. Dominic would get frustrated, jaw tightening, eyes narrowing as he tried to recalibrate. Selena would smile, reach for his hand and say, "Everything happens for a reason." And somehow, he'd breathe again. On the other side, Selena's world wasn't always as fluid as she liked to pretend. In her business, especially with her clothing line, she had a habit of letting things slide. Missed details, loose budgets, vendors who didn't always deliver. Dominic noticed. Instead of criticizing, he advised. "You can't let business slide just because you're nice," he told her once. "If you want to make the best product, you have to protect it." In the past, Selena might have brushed that off, but coming from Dominic, from someone who followed through, who cared about outcomes, it landed differently. She listened. They made a good team. Not because they were the same, but because they were willing to learn from each other. Selena wasn't always on time. Dominic was always early. Selena watched what Dominic's discipline produced, how goals became results, how consistency created freedom, and slowly began to implement it in her own life. Dominic watched Selena trust the moment, trust herself, trust life to unfold, and slowly learned that control wasn't the same as safety. They adjusted. They compromised. They chose each other, again and again. And somewhere between structure and spontaneity, planning and presence, they didn't just fall in love, they grew into it. One evening, they sat side by side on Dominic's back patio, the air warm and still, cicadas humming like a low chorus in the distance. The lights strung along the railing cast a soft glow, enough to see each other clearly without feeling exposed. Dominic stared out into the yard for a long moment before speaking. "I want to do something spontaneous," he said. Selena turned toward him, surprised, not by the words, but by how carefully he said them. "The problem," he continued with a small shake of his head, "is that I don't really know how. My mind doesn't work that way. I keep trying to plan the spontaneity, which defeats the purpose." She smiled, warmth spreading across her face. "To go with the flow," she said gently, "you have to do the opposite of what you usually do." He glanced at her. "Meaning?" "Meaning," she said, shifting closer. "You stop asking what makes sense. You stop optimizing. You stop preparing. You choose something simply because it feels right, or interesting, or a little scary." Dominic considered that, his jaw tightening briefly before easing. Then he smiled. Not his usual controlled smile, but something lighter, freer. "I guess," he said slowly, "I'll have to think like you." Selena laughed softly. "Careful," she teased. "That comes with dancing plans, late nights, and decisions made 5 minutes before they happen." He leaned back in his chair, looking up at the sky. "I think," he said, "I could handle that, at least for one night." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his, not pulling, not leading, just present. And for the first time, Dominic wasn't thinking about what came next. He was already there. Selena's mother and aunts invited Dominic and his parents over for a barbecue. They wanted to meet the young man who had become such a steady presence in her life and the family that raised him. Selena, as always, arrived styled without effort. A flowy floral dress moved with her, light and confident. Her heart still skipped a beat every time Dominic walked into a room. She didn't know how she had missed him all those times at the gym. No, she did know. She had been focused on herself, and he had come to her anyway. The families blended easily. Laughter moved freely through the backyard, conversations overlapping, plates being passed around. Dominic's father was exactly as Dominic had described, regimented in posture, precise in speech, but warm. Surprisingly so. Dominic leaned toward Selena and murmured, "I've never seen my dad this relaxed around new people." His father was across the yard playing cornhole with one of Selena's uncles and Dominic's younger brother, laughing louder than anyone expected. That's when Dominic had a thought. He stepped away quietly and made a call. 20 minutes later, the reason for that call arrived. The family had settled around the table, eating family style, stories flowing as easily as the sweet tea. Dominic stood suddenly, clearing his throat. The table quieted. "I just want to say," he began, "how incredible it feels to see the people who love Selena and the people who love me getting along like this." He looked around, meeting familiar and new faces. "And from this day forward," he continued, "my wife Selena and I will make sure our lives are always filled with amazing people like you." Selena froze. Wife? Before she could process it, the gate opened. A minister from Dominic's church stepped into the yard. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dominic walked around the table, reached for Selena, and gently pulled her to her feet. "Selena," he said, voice steady but full, "you've turned my life into something I look forward to living. You taught me how to just be, to enjoy the moment." Her eyes filled. "In this moment," he continued, "I love you, and I want you with me always. Will you marry me, right now?" "Right now?" she asked breathlessly. "Right now," he said. "Don't worry, it's safe." She stared at him for a long second, emotions colliding, heart racing. "This is not what I meant," she said, half laughing, half crying. when I told you to do the opposite of what you usually do?" Dominic smiled. "But did it work?" Selena screamed, "Yes!" The entire table exhaled at once, cheers erupting, tears flowing, laughter breaking through as the moment landed fully. And just like that, without planning, without hesitation, without fear, Dominic chose spontaneity, and Selena chose him. After the excitement settled and the laughter thinned into warm murmurs, Selena looked down at her hand. Her finger was bare. She lifted it slightly, examining it with a playful seriousness, then looked up at Dominic. "I guess spontaneous didn't come with a ring," she said. Dominic smiled, slow and honest. "It will," he said. "But if it had tonight, the moment wouldn't have been spontaneous." She studied his face, searching for doubt, for apology. There was none. Selena leaned in and kissed him, soft, certain, full. "I prefer this moment," she whispered against his cheek, "over a planned one." Dominic wrapped his arms around her then, not careful this time, not holding back. Selena shifted closer, fitting into him like it had always been natural. She rose just enough to whisper against his ear, her voice soft and teasing. "Do you want to do something spontaneous now?" Dominic closed his eyes, a quiet smile pulling at his mouth. The word now landed differently than any plan ever had. He inhaled slowly, savoring the feeling instead of trying to manage it. When he opened his eyes, his voice was low, warm, certain. "Baby," he said, brushing his thumb along her waist. "There's no more asking." He leaned in just enough for her to feel the promise without rushing it. Whenever, wherever, if it happens, it happens. Selena smiled, satisfied, not because of what would come next, but because for the first time, he wasn't resisting the moment. He was giving all his intentions to discipline himself in loving and supporting Selena.
Thank you for listening to Heart Chat Stories. Every story is written with love, to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that new beginnings are always possible. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so others can find healing through story. Until next time, keep your heart open and your spirit lifted.